One of the toughest things about discussing Star Wars canon and legends and the notion of recanonization is when are we being indulgent versus what actually worked about the EU. In particular, I've had this on my mind a lot lately as I've been thinking over Darth Bane, particularly one of the weakest elements of the Darth Bane trilogy, the massive hole that it introduced regarding the Rule of Two. Bane is a character who was fundamentally created to explain what Yoda says in The Phantom Menace. When Yoda says that only two there are, a master and an apprentice, we have to reckon with the fact that in the EU there were actually like hundreds of Sith. So what happened? Clearly at some point between then and now, someone introduced something called the Rule of Two, and it made its way down to Yoda, and so Darth Bane was created to say that is the bridge between the old style of Sith, where there are tons of them, and the new. Now again, the only restriction that was put on these books is that you need to create the Rule of Two, and do so in a way that Yoda can know about. And it did not do that. Bane creates the Rule of Two, and without telling anyone about it, without telling the galaxy in the slightest, he also wipes out the Sith, and that is the moment when they supposedly go extinct. So suddenly we are in a catch-22 where there is no feasible way for Yoda to learn about the Rule of Two. I know that someone is going to mention that the EU did later on try to shoehorn in a guy to tell the Jedi about the Rule of Two. There's a dude who exists solely for that purpose, and even he doesn't really achieve it. But no matter how you crack it, the issue still stands that when the Jedi Order hears from this guy that the Sith are alive and the Rule of Two is something that they do now, which they never have in the past, they can either take it seriously as a legitimate piece of information about the resurgent Sith Order and come to the conclusion that they have not been extinct for a millennium, as Ki-Adi-Mundi says, or they can dismiss it as the ravings of a madman, and it would not be significant enough for Yoda to remember hundreds of years later to repeat to Mace Windu. It's really awkward and clumsy to try and find a middle ground where Yoda takes it seriously enough to remember and to think that it's something that the Sith would still be doing when they reappear in The Phantom Menace, and yet not seriously enough to have known that they were alive prior to the events of The Phantom Menace. So you're kinda stuck. There's not really a good solution to it. And the reason for that is that it simply isn't meant to be the case. You know, this is trying to combine the EU lore with George's vision for the Sith. Frankly, most of the Old Republic is just fundamentally opposed to George's vision for the series. You know, George explicitly stated there was no war between the Jedi and Sith. So I guess the Sith just ruled unopposed for a little bit, and then the Jedi deposed them at some point. I don't know exactly what George wanted. Frankly, that's an instance where I prefer the EU's version of events. But Bane is an awkward, tricky middle ground, because I don't think that the explanation that they gave works, and I don't think that the guy they had to, convey that information to the Jedi really lands. So that does sort of bring with it the idea that they should do something new with the new canon, That's exactly what the Legends wipe was for, to get rid of the stuff that didn't work, and so if it doesn't function, you should get rid of it. But I like Bane, and I like those books, and a lot of other people do too. And it's tough to say, do we cut out something good that I enjoyed for the sake of making a potentially slightly more coherent story? I guess the question really comes down to, the Star Wars fandom is fundamentally full of a bunch of the most obnoxious, pedantic nerds you've ever met in your life, and we are absolutely the kind of people to complain about these things. So it really is just a matter of, are we willing to accept some slight inconsistencies, some slightly nonsensical elements, to enjoy a good story? Personally, I'm okay with it. That's what we have other books and comics for, is to smooth over those things, to find, here's the way that it can work functionally enough. This is a series built on the back of hype moments and aura held together by lore that is 90% duct tape and chewing gum, just strapping it together, desperately hoping it holds water. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Is it worth keeping some of the more minute issues that don't work in order to keep the larger scale items that do? Or should we just throw everything out with the bathwater and try something completely new? Change up the Old Republic entirely. No more Revan, no more Bane, no nothing. Get rid of it all and we'll do George's thing, 2,000 years of Sith. Let's give it a shot. Like I said, let me know, and follow for more Star Wars lore discussion.